Okay, so today we're going to take a deep dive into GHCL Ltd
Yeah.
and their Q3 FY25 performance. We've got a whole bunch of sources for this one, investor presentations, financial reports, and even a little bit about their work with sustainability. It's a pretty fascinating look into an Indian manufacturing giant that's making some serious waves in the global commodities market.
You might be thinking, soda ash, what's the big deal? But that's where things get really interesting with GHCL. They're actually the second largest soda ash manufacturer in India. And this, seemingly simple chemical is actually crucial for way more industries than you might think. We're talking glass detergents, even solar panels and EV batteries.
Wow, that's a lot more than I would have guessed. Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty, can we just take a step back and clarify? What exactly is GHCL Limited, and what makes them a company worth paying attention to?
Sure. So GHCL is a big player in the Indian chemical industry. Obviously, they produce soda ash, but they also do sodium bicarbonate edible salt, and they're even starting to explore renewable energy. What I find really interesting is their diverse product portfolio. It's not just about spreading their bets, it's about strategically positioning themselves to weather market fluctuations and capitalize on emerging opportunities.
Right. It's like they're building a really solid foundation. And it's not just about profits either. They have this whole GHCL way philosophy that emphasizes sustainable and responsible growth. Considering all stakeholders, not just shareholders, it seems like more and more companies are realizing that sustainability isn't just ethical, it's actually good business.
Absolutely. It's not just a trend, it's a fundamental shift in how businesses operate. And GHCL seems to be ahead of the curve integrating this thinking into their core strategy. So are you ready to dive into those Q3 numbers?
Yeah, let's see what we've got. The investor presentation has some pretty interesting figures. Revenue might be slightly down compared to last year, but their EBITDA margin has jumped significantly. And for those of us who don't speak fluent finance, EBITDA basically measures a company's operating profitability. So this jump suggests they're becoming more efficient. Plus, they're sitting on a healthy cash surplus of over 920 crore rupees.
Yeah, that's a really strong financial picture, especially considering all the global headwinds they're facing. Remember all that talk about global soda ash dumping we discussed earlier? That's a perfect example of how external factors can really impact a company's bottom line. But GHCL has managed to deliver a solid performance, especially with that impressive EBITDA margin and the positive sequential growth.
Yeah, it's impressive. And speaking of global headwinds, Mr. R.S. Jalen, the managing director, seems pretty optimistic in his commentary. He talks about GHCL's reliability as a supplier, which is super important in these uncertain times. But he also brings up the issue of global soda ash dumping and how the Indian government stepped in with that minimum import price, or MIP. Can you explain why this MIP is such a big deal?
Sure. Think of the MIP as a kind of protective barrier for the Indian soda ash industry. It sets a minimum price for imported soda ash, which prevents foreign competitors from flooding the market with super cheap products, and undercutting domestic manufacturers like GHCL. It's designed to level the playing field and protect the Indian industry from unfair pricing practices. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out in the long run.
Okay, that makes sense. So to really understand GHCL's performance, we need to zoom out and look at the global picture. We've got this chart from the investor presentation that breaks down the global soda ash market by region. It's like a puzzle where every piece affects the others.
Exactly. We see weak demand in Europe, which is usually a big market for soda ash. But then China's domestic demand is so strong that it's absorbing their increased production. And then you've got the Americas dealing with oversupply, which is leading them to increase exports. It's a really complex dance of supply and demand, and companies like GHCL have to navigate this global landscape strategically.
Right, and we can't forget about Turkey. They're facing weak demand in Europe, and now they're turning to Asian markets like China for their exports.
Yeah,
Everyone's trying to find their footing in this constantly shifting market.
exactly. And that's why this global perspective is so important for understanding GHCL's performance. It's not just about their internal operations, it's about how they position themselves within this larger ecosystem. They're competing on a global stage, and that requires a lot of strategic agility.
For sure. And speaking of strategy, GHCL has some major initiatives in the works. They just got environmental clearance for a brand new soda ash plant in Gujarat. To me, building a new plant in the middle of all this global uncertainty seems like a pretty bold move. What do you think?
It definitely shows confidence. This new project isn't just about expanding capacity, it's about solidifying their position as a leader in the Indian soda ash market. Remember that MIP we talked about? That policy support from the government is creating a more predictable market environment, which allows GHCL to make these big investments with less risk.
That makes sense. They're also putting more resources into the Zara Zumara Saltfield project to secure their raw material supply. It's like they're really building a solid foundation for future growth.
It's like vertical integration. By controlling a key raw material like salt, they can minimize supply chain disruptions and potentially lower costs. That's especially important now with all the geopolitical uncertainty in the world. Global supply chains can be really fragile.
Yeah, that's a really good point. But what I find really impressive is that they're balancing these big expansion plans with a strong focus on sustainability. The GHCL way isn't just a marketing gimmick, it's reflected in their actions.
Absolutely, they're walking the walk, especially with their work on women's empowerment. They've helped over 10,000 women in rural communities through self-help groups and skill development programs. That's a powerful example of how a company can create positive social impact alongside their business goals.
Yeah, that really stood out to me too. It's not just about checking boxes, it's about investing in the communities where they operate and contributing to a more inclusive and equitable society. Well, let's switch gears for a second and talk about some recent legal and regulatory developments that could affect GHCL. First, their mining lease period got reduced from 30 years to 20 years.
Yeah, that's a significant development that could have long-term consequences for their raw material sourcing, but they are appealing the decision and seem confident in their legal standing. It's definitely a situation worth monitoring.
Absolutely. And then there's the Supreme Court ruling on state taxes on mining activities. No specific demand has been made on GHCL yet, but the potential financial impact is still a big question mark.
This adds another layer of complexity for them. It really highlights those regulatory challenges that businesses have to face, and it just shows how important it is to stay agile and adaptable in a world that's constantly changing.
Yeah, it's like navigating a minefield. You have to carefully assess every step and anticipate potential risks. But even with all these legal hurdles, GHCL's commitment to innovation is really shining through. They've implemented some really impressive energy-efficient solutions like that RBC plant for wastewater treatment and their chiller integration using seawater.
Those are smart moves on multiple levels. They're reducing their environmental impact, but they're also contributing to long-term cost savings. It's
Right.
a win-win for the company and the planet.
For sure. What I find really interesting is their adoption of robotic process automation, or RPA, to automate things like invoice processing and document management. It's like they're really embracing technology to boost efficiency and streamline operations.
It shows they're committed to digital transformation, which is something that's happening across all industries. By automating these repetitive tasks, they can free up their employees to focus on more strategic work. Things like problem solving, innovation, and building relationships. Those are the things that are hard to automate.
All right, it's about working smarter, not harder. So we've covered a lot of ground already. Financial performance, global market dynamics, strategic initiatives, sustainability efforts, and those legal challenges. It's clear that GHCL is a company on the move, navigating a complex and ever-changing world.
They're not just reacting to market trends, they're actively shaping their own future. It's a really compelling story of ambition, resilience, and a commitment to doing business differently. But before we move on, I want to pause for a second and ask you, what stands out to you so far? What's really piqued your interest?
Yeah, take a moment to think about it. What resonated with you the most? Because understanding GHCL's journey can give us valuable insights into the larger forces shaping the global economy and the evolving role of businesses in a world facing all these new challenges and opportunities. As we dig deeper into GHCL, I keep thinking about the bigger picture. There's so much talk these days about the circular economy, where businesses try to create more sustainable models by reducing waste and reusing resources. And it seems like a lot of GHCL's initiatives fit right into that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Their wastewater treatment plant, the RBC plant we mentioned, is a perfect example. It not only cleans the water, but it also lets them recover valuable resources, which they can then feed back into the production cycle. It's completely in line with the whole idea of a circular economy.
Right, it's a closed loop. And it's encouraging to see that these initiatives aren't just driven by a sense of responsibility, but also by smart business strategy. By reducing waste and becoming more efficient, they're also lowering their costs and gaining a competitive advantage. So it's a win-win for the environment and their bottom line.
Exactly. It's proof that sustainability and profitability can go together. Their chiller integration using seawater is another great example. They're reducing their reliance on fresh water, which is a huge issue in many parts of the world. And at the same time, they're improving their efficiency and cutting costs. It's about thinking holistically, looking at the long-term implications of their actions and finding those innovative solutions that benefit everyone.
It's like a ripple effect. And we can't forget about their efforts to go digital, which
Hmm.
might seem like a small thing, but it's actually pretty significant. Things like the automated weighbridge operations and the historian system, they're really embracing technology to improve efficiency and transparency.
Yeah, in a world that's increasingly driven by data, companies need to leverage technology to stay competitive. GHCL's investments in these areas show they're not just keeping up with the times, they're actively leading the way in the digital transformation that's sweeping across so many industries.
And it's not just about implementing all these fancy complex systems. Their use of robotic process automation, or RPA, is a great example of how even simple tasks can be automated. Things like invoice processing and document management. It's like giving their employees a digital assistant to handle all the boring stuff.
Exactly. RPA is becoming a game changer because it lets employees focus on more important things. Things like creativity, problem solving, building relationships. Those are the uniquely human skills that are really hard to automate. So it allows companies to make the most of their workforce and boost productivity.
Right. It's all about working smarter, not harder.
Right.
And in today's job market, I bet that focus on using technology to make things more efficient and improve employee satisfaction is a big plus. Companies that embrace these changes are going to be the ones that attract the best talent. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about those potential roadblocks we mentioned earlier. Those legal and regulatory developments could really throw a wrench into GHCL's plans. That reduced mining lease period is a major concern.
Yeah, it's definitely a big deal that could impact their long-term plans for sourcing raw materials. But remember, they're appealing the decision and they seem pretty confident about their legal position. This proactive approach suggests they're not going to just sit back and take it. They're ready to fight for what they believe in.
That's good to hear. It reminds us that even the most successful companies face unexpected obstacles, and how they respond to those challenges can really show their resilience and adaptability.
Absolutely. And this situation is still developing. We'll have to wait and see how it plays out and what it means for GHCL in the long run.
Okay, and then there's that Supreme Court ruling on state taxes for mining activities.
Mm.
Even though there hasn't been any specific demand made on GHCL, yet that uncertainty about the financial impact is worrying.
It's a perfect example of how regulatory changes can create so much uncertainty for businesses. It highlights the need for flexibility and having backup plans in place to deal with these unexpected shifts. It's like walking a tightrope. You need balance, and you need to think carefully about every step you take.
That's a great analogy. These legal and regulatory hurdles aren't unique to GHCL, though, right? They reflect broader trends in the mining and resources sectors all over the world. Governments are increasingly focused on responsible resource extraction and making sure they get their fair share of the profits.
Yeah, you're right. It's a sign of the changing relationship between businesses and governments. Companies need to be aware of these shifting expectations and adapt their strategies accordingly.
It's a new world out there. But even with all these challenges, GHCL is still moving forward with their ambitious expansion plans. That new greenfield soda ash plant in Gujarat is a clear sign of their confidence in the long-term growth of the industry.
It's a bold move considering all the global uncertainty, but it also shows their commitment to growth and solidifying their position as a market leader.
And with the government's minimum import price in place, they have some protection from unfair competition. It creates a more stable environment for these kinds of big investments. So it's like they're strengthening their position at home while also getting ready to expand globally.
And their investment in the Zarzumara salt field project is another important piece of the puzzle. By securing a reliable source of raw materials, they're creating a solid foundation for sustainable growth.
It's amazing how all these different pieces fit together, from securing raw materials to increasing production to dealing with legal and regulatory issues. It's like a complex dance of strategic decisions that companies like GHCL have to master.
Yeah, it's that interplay of internal and external factors that makes analyzing a company's performance so interesting. We're not just looking at numbers, we're trying to understand the story behind those numbers, the forces that are shaping their journey. And GHCL's journey is a pretty compelling one. From their humble beginnings to their current position as a major player in the Indian chemical industry, it's a testament to their ability to adapt, their resilience, and their commitment to innovation.
It's an inspiring story. But there's another side to GHCL that we haven't fully explored yet. Their commitment to sustainability and social responsibility goes beyond just good business practices. It seems like it's a fundamental part of their company culture.
Yeah, this is where GHCL really sets themselves apart. They're not just talking about sustainability, they're weaving it into every aspect of their operations and into their relationships with the communities where they work. It's not an afterthought, it's a core part of who they are.
Right, it's in their DNA. Their work on women's empowerment through those self-help groups is a great example. They had a direct impact on the lives of over 10,000 women in rural communities, giving them the skills and resources to become financially independent.
It shows the potential for businesses to be a force for good in the world. By investing in the communities where they operate, companies like GHCL aren't just making profits, they're helping to create a more equitable and sustainable society. It creates a ripple effect that goes way beyond their immediate operations, empowering people and communities to create positive change.
It's a win-win for everyone involved.
Exactly. This holistic approach to business where profit and purpose are intertwined is what makes GHCL so interesting. They're proving that companies can be successful while also making a positive contribution to society.
It's really inspiring to see a company walking the walk like that. But we also have to remember that GHCL is still a business operating in a very competitive market. They face risks and challenges just like any other company.
Of course, it's important to be realistic. As much as we admire their commitment to sustainability, we still need to analyze their performance with a critical eye. We need to think about the potential impact of those legal and regulatory issues we talked about, and the fact that the global soda ash market can be so unpredictable.
It's a complex situation. We also need to ask ourselves some tough questions. Are they making the right choices to minimize these risks? Are they investing in the right areas to ensure long-term growth and profitability? Are they really as committed to sustainability as they seem, or is it just clever marketing?
Those are all good questions that we need to consider carefully as we continue our deep dive. But before we move on, I'd like to ask you, what are your initial impressions of GHCL's approach to sustainability and social responsibility?
Yeah, take a moment to think about it. What really stood out to you? What questions are you left with? Remember, this isn't just about understanding one company. It's about looking at the bigger picture, the role of businesses in a world that's changing so rapidly, and how companies like GHCL are trying to navigate all these complex challenges of opportunities.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about GHCL, right? Their financial strategic moves, sustainability, even those legal challenges. But I feel like there's this one big question we haven't really addressed.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Are they just playing it safe,
Yeah.
riding the current market trends? Or are they actually trying to shape the future and become a real force for change in the industry?
Right. It's one thing to be successful in an established market, but it's another thing entirely to be a pioneer, pushing boundaries, creating new possibilities. And I think we're seeing signs of both with GHCL. They're definitely excelling at their core business, strong financial, strategic thinking, all that. But some of the moves we've discussed, especially their interest in those emerging applications for soda ash, it suggests they're not content with just staying in their lane.
Yeah, those emerging applications,
Mm-hmm.
especially using soda ash in solar panels and EV batteries. That's really fascinating. It's like they're not just selling a chemical anymore. They're positioning themselves as a key player in the shift to a more sustainable future.
Exactly. Imagine if GHCL becomes a major supplier for these booming industries. They'd be riding a wave of growth driven by global megatrends, clean energy, sustainable transportation. Those are the things that are shaping the future. And GHCL could be right at the forefront.
It's a powerful position to be in, for sure. They could break free from the limitations of a traditional industry and become part of something much bigger, a story of global transformation. And their commitment to sustainability, that GHCL way, it fits perfectly with that vision. It's not just about minimizing their own environmental impact. It's about being part of the solution, creating a more sustainable and equitable future for everyone.
Right. Their GHCL way becomes more than just a slogan in that context. It's a guiding principle that shapes their decisions and defines who they are as a company.
But how can we tell if they're really living up to that philosophy? Is it genuine or just good marketing?
That's the big question, isn't it? And there's no simple answer. We have to look past the marketing and really scrutinize their actions, their investments, their impact on the world. And I think we've seen some pretty compelling evidence so far. Their energy efficiency initiatives, their work empowering women, their embrace of new technologies, it all suggests they're serious about sustainability.
Yeah, I agree. But we should also acknowledge the complexities and potential contradictions. They're in an industry that naturally has an environmental impact. They've got those legal challenges related to mining. There's always a tension between profits and purpose. And GHCL is dealing with that just like any other company.
It's a balancing act, definitely. And in the end, it's up to each of us to weigh the evidence and decide for ourselves. Do we believe they're truly committed to sustainability? Or is it just a smart way to market themselves?
There's no right or wrong answer. We want you, the listener, to think critically about it. Consider all sides and come to your own conclusions.
Okay, so as we wrap up our deep dive into GHCL, What are the main takeaways? What's important to remember? First, GHCL is doing well in a tough global market. They've got a solid foundation, a clear plan for growth, and a commitment to innovation.
They're also embracing sustainability as a core part of their business, taking concrete steps to reduce their impact on the environment and empower communities.
And let's not forget those legal and regulatory challenges. How they handle those will be crucial for their future success.
And finally, maybe most importantly, they're setting themselves up to be a major player in the transition to a more sustainable future, especially with those new applications for soda ash we talked about.
It's a really interesting story of a company that's changing, adapting, trying to make a positive difference. It reflects the bigger challenges and opportunities that businesses are facing today.
So what does this all mean for you? What questions does this deep dive leave you with? As you go about your day, think about the companies you interact with, the products you buy, the investments you make. Are they helping to create a more sustainable and equitable future?
It's a question worth thinking about because ultimately we all have a role to play in shaping the world we want to live in.
Absolutely. And on that note, we'll wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a fascinating topic. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep learning.